I'm excited to be here. I hope everybody's enjoying their day at Chatbots conference.
Yeah, I know I'm having a great time, and we've had such great speakers so far. And it's, I know the space, and I'm learning each minute. So, and the topic that you and I are going to be talking about now is like, we've already had questions about it in the comments.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So it's, what's the best way to implement this, and how do you structure your team? And I remember when you and I first talked about this, like 6 months ago-ish, you said that, the way you form things and the way you structure things is going to produce different insights. And I thought that's such a deep takeaway. And so I'm really excited about this topic. And so why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself? I will also take a few poll questions. So you guys are going to see polls. You can feel free to participate, and you can share your screen. And then we'll talk about more deeply about this topic. And then we'll also take questions from the audience.
Awesome. Great. Yes. My name is Mira Lynn. I am product manager of conversational AI at GoDaddy. And I would love, I think this was pitched as like a fireside chat. So I would love to like really have this be conversational live instead of AI. If people have questions about how, points that I've made, like bring it on. Let's just have a discussion about it. But I would like to set up and just present a couple of my thoughts on how you could approach forming a conversational design or conversational AI team. So I will start there, but please feel free to shoot questions, and we can see where that takes us. So let me figure out how to share my screen in a second here.
It's the little computer icon, right? Next to the microphone icon.
Yes. My PowerPoint is not showing up as an option, though.
Hang on. Share your screen. You can share your screen.
Yeah, bear with me. Sorry, technical issues. 1 second. Oh my. A lot of this is going to come from, our experience at GoDaddy and how we've approached it. So we can share that, and then I would love to also hear from other people who are in similar places in their journey. We're about 3 years in to our chatbot and conversational AI approach, and you'll see also from this too that absolutely no team. I believe strongly that absolutely no team is the same. So there's also that kind of freedom to it too. That's like, do what's right for you. Okay, cool. Can you see my screen now? Am I sharing? Good, great.
Yes.
Just checking. Okay. So really important thing is what is happening with you and with your company and with your customers, because the whole point of having a program around this, or in developing technology, using existing technology, building things, is so that it meets a need and it fills, it has a purpose. So these are, before you even start, writing job descriptions or thinking about which exact tech you're going to use, is what are you trying to do? Where are you? Are you a gigantic Fortune 500 company? Are you just a solopreneur on the total other side, right? You're just trying to keep customers from calling me all the time, right? So it's what's your goal? What is your goal for this development? But also, what resources do you have at your disposal to do that? So that's that first one, is like, who are you as a business, as a company, and what do you have available to you? It's going to depend. That's going to change a lot of the choices that you make. But then
Yeah.
the really, really important thing, right, is what do your customers need? Are your customers typically asking very similar questions? Are they really mostly looking to buy something? Do all of your customers call? Right? Like maybe you have dabbled in like chat options, but none of your customers ever use that. Very important to consider if you're talking about trying to automate some kind of conversation with them. Where are they? What channel are they using? Where are they physically in the world, right? And what kind of diversity amongst your customers do you have? Do you have a really wide variety of tech savviness among your customers, or are things like that more homogeneous among the customer base that you have? So some things to consider there about your specific context. Also, Stefan, jump in with any questions too here.
Yeah, so why don't you give a few examples about how those parameters are going to change the way you make a decision?
Oh, absolutely.
So for example, yeah, and you can, jump in like how you think through these customers and company size.
Yeah. The needs, right. This is very high level. That needs bullet, I think, is the most important thing. The other elements here are going to implement how you pragmatically implement a solution. But what your customer needs should be the primary point of how you approach fulfilling that need, and what kind of team you need to put behind it. So for example, if like I had mentioned, if your customers are primarily looking to buy things, right? That's the number one thing your customers contact you about. You're gonna immediately, like off the bat, look at developing solutions that help your customers fulfill that goal. But if your customers are they're contacting you for support, you're going to have a very different solution, and you're going to need a very different team to support that solution than if it's, and that's just a very basic delineation, but then if it's sales, right?
Right.
And I think another I had alluded to this as like a tech savviness. If your customers are contacting you about setting up their tools or their products that they've bought you, and they need a lot of hand holding, and there's a lot of walkthrough, and there's a lot of introduction and context setting, and they need a lot of help with a lot of steps or the steps that are required. That's going to be really different than if you have customers who are actual business owners themselves, maybe, or like let's say they are web developers, right? There's a whole set of customers at GoDaddy that need something completely different than our independent solopreneur customer segment. And the way that we approach them and the way that we talk to them needs to be really different. So it's just really important to have access to an understanding of what your customers are looking for when they contact you.
Got it. And when you know that, let's say that that your customer service forward, for example, does that mean that when you structure your team, and obviously the team's going to reflect your needs, so it's going to be customer service forward, does that also mean that you're going to put people that are in customer service in more of a leadership role in terms of how they drive the design and development of the product?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely recommend looking at your team development in that way. Right? Like I mentioned this a little bit later, but at GoDaddy, we have previously live support agents on our conversational design team. because it's super important to have people who have a direct connection with that experience of the customer support experience. So absolutely, from how your business culture also approaches that customer need is going to definitely inform building that team, right? So I love that idea of taking someone from like a leadership position who understands not only that customer experience, but also your business context in that area, and involving them in the process and in the team too.
Got it. That's very interesting. Well, Mira, why don't you share with us some of the ways that you guys at GoDaddy have thought about these problems and how you've gone about solving them, and how that's different than the typical standard way companies are doing it, and then like what impact that's had on you as a result. Like what added value did you get out of it, additional insights, because you ended up structuring it more efficiently on the front end?
Great question. So at GoDaddy, one of the most unique approaches I think that we've taken with structuring our team is actually our relationship between our conversational designers and our engineering and data and implementation partners within the company. What we saw when we, flash back to when we started this program so many years ago, what we saw around a lot was sort of a production engineering approach to this, where writers would write a script essentially, and then sort of hand it over to an engineering team to implement and figure out how that gets developed. But I think I actually have a.
You have a slide on it, or?
I think so. Let me see. Yes. Okay. Cool. So it's sort of I had a bit where I was like talking about like, and also your relationship with engineering and live care can also impact this, but this is really what I want to point out, is that the conversation itself is like the fabric of the experience. It's the actual thing that your customers are going to be interacting with. And so what was really, really important to us at GoDaddy was that we maintain an autonomy in our conversational design team that allowed them to own the entire process from design to writing to deployment for the chatbot experience. And so we engaged engineering in what I think is a pretty unique way in the industry that allowed them to help tool for our writers, our designers, to be able to do that. And one of the reasons, and just I guess this is like to step back to like, why did we do it this way, other than just really championing the words and the design as a driver, was that we actually really love when our customers call us.
Okay.
We love building a relationship with our customers in that live experience. And so knowing that about, and our customers really like that. It's one of the things that keeps coming up out of our data about, what sets GoDaddy apart. What do customers really like about GoDaddy?
So they interact. It's not like, oh, I have to call this 1-800 number again, or I have to text them again.
I mean, sometimes it can be like that. Obviously, right? Like if you're in a troubleshooting scenario or something's broken, like yes, there is that. Of course, I'm not going to go out there and say everyone who calls GoDaddy is super happy, but but on the whole, that is the relationship building that our guides regularly do with our customers is of really high value, and so bringing that culture and that experience and really making sure that that's an important part of how we interact with our customers, even through automation and AI and chatbots and IVR automation, all of those things should be an extension of that piece of the customer business interaction that we really value and that our customers really value.
Got it. So that's your core. And then from that core, everything else is created. And then the very next step is like talking to people. So what does that conversation look like? And then this kind of goes with a couple of the questions we have.
Oh, good.
So does that mean that what your core is? Now the conversation piece comes next. So in the next step, did you have conversational designers build flows, create content, and then have the engineers, bring them into, develop them?
We actually had our engineers work more on the framework that allowed our designers to do everything in that pipeline. So our designers are the ones who publish, they are in charge of pushing changes, effectively deploying what they've created, because our engineers really have worked on the tooling around it instead of being involved in a production capacity of like, here's the day-to-day, let's create this piece of it and let's move. The designers need a change in the conversation. Okay, we've got to make these changes here, or this is the logic of how the conversation flows. That's all up to the designers. The designers do all of that. And so our engineers are really in a support role that allows that autonomy for our designers.
Got it. So your designers are really leading that conversation. They're literally, and then when they need help from the developers, then they bring them in a supportive fashion. They make changes, they deploy, updates and so on.
Yeah, I definitely don't want it to seem like our engineers are not important, because they are paramount to everything that we're doing. Oh, yeah. But it is, I think it's more about not having the designers be sort of beholden to the engineering cycles and the engineering schedules that may be happening that can sometimes not be as flexible or as responsive as we need it to be, right? We find an error in the chatbot, or we see a spike in something customers are saying that we want to respond to really quickly. I think that allows structuring it in this way allows us to be a little bit more responsive.
Got it. And so Greg asks, are your conversational designers in a dedicated role, or are they also like graphic designers, UX writers, etc.?
They are dedicated. Yeah.
Dedicated.
Yeah, we have some folks that came from our what we now call traditional help team, folks writing help articles, and they came over into the conversational design role. And then we have from live care, I think, which I mentioned, right? People on the phones with customers that have come into conversational design, but they are absolutely dedicated to our conversational design program.
I see. And do they have like a background in data or using?
What a great question. So we have a really wide variety of backgrounds besides those two, just like their immediate background within GoDaddy, but screenwriting, script writing, character development, training. And then I added in some things that you might not think about, like think outside the box, psychology, life coaching. Those are all super relevant to crafting conversations for for users to interact with.
In essence, the last 2-3 that you mentioned are like the best at crafting conversations. You pay them for conversations.
Right. Now, and that's an awesome point that you make, which is sort of like the difference between a native language speaker and someone who learns a language is that it doesn't translate as easily as you might think. If someone's great at having conversations, it doesn't automatically mean that they're going to be awesome from jump at crafting conversations, because it is a really different way of thinking about how a conversation is structured. However, I do think that, yes, if you are skilled at having conversations, that can translate. But that was something interesting that we found, that is, it's not one-to-one. Speaking and easily having a conversation live is very different than actually designing a conversation that works and flows naturally and seems smart and seems empathetic. It's actually a little bit like separated, more so than you might think.
I think that it's important to appreciate fully that a lot of times when you start a sentence, you don't necessarily know how you're going to end it.
Yeah.
Even like as we're talking, like you don't know 100% what's going to come out next.
Right.
So I have a great
on the fly a little bit.
Right. And it's going to loop together and make sense. Jess asks a really good question. What tools are the designers using to implement this iterative enhancements without requiring developers or engineers?
So we author in Dialogflow.
Okay.
And then we deploy through both a custom UI that we have on our site, as well as a UI piece provided by our live chat vendor. And so the tooling that I mentioned is sort of like that frame. Like, we couldn't have done that just from day one, gotten a contact with Dialogflow and been like, okay, we're going to have the writers control this. And we went through a lot of iterations of how we use Dialogflow in order to set up this ideal situation. But we worked with our developers to help build connections from Dialogflow into all these different pieces that are built for the writers to use and control. So it was more like, I think, we definitely engaged our engineers, like they were involved absolutely from the start and heavily, but it was all about really that tooling aspect. And we have really also really far to go too, right? Like I wouldn't say we've got it figured out. It's no problem. But I am really proud of the journey that we've been on, and the progress we've made to that end of having the customer be the chatbot designer. But specifically speaking, we have a whole set of JSON payloads that our writers use in Dialogflow, and we use Dialogflow as our CMS of sorts.
Okay.
But also that tool lends itself really well to kind of developing on top of. I think that's probably one of Google's goals with that tool, is that it's sort of a kernel, and then you can do what you want with it. And I think they do that a little bit better than other competitors that they have, which is one of the reasons that we have chosen them.
So it sounds like, and you can tell me, it sounds like you guys have like a pre-established framework that your developers built, and you that if someone's going to have a conversation with GoDaddy, it's probably going to follow like 10 or 15 use cases, just making up a number, and then it's going to hit those payloads or JSON APIs, more or less. Is that in the ballpark?
Yeah, you could describe it that way.
How would you describe it?
It's so we have a lot more intense than that, but just because we're so GoDaddy offers so much,
right?
And we have customers across all of that, product involvement, and and needs are all different along those lines, and depending on who they are, right? So it's a wild space. But what I would say is it's more about allowing the authors to develop logic, allowing the conversational designers to develop the logic of how a conversation flows without needing to like specify recs and then hand that to an engineer to implement. We've built these series of payloads for the designers to be able to put them together to that, and then the result is the logic effectively in the bot. If that, we might be saying exactly the same thing.
Maybe. At the end of the day, like, not to oversimplify, but let's say you had an app that turned the lights on, right? There's only so many conversations you can have around it. So you let the designers figure out how people are going to talk about turning the lights on. But at the end of the day, there's one input and one output.
Yes.
Right? There's like, well, maybe, I want to turn the lights out by 50%, and Google turns it up.
But it's still like one output, right? With like different parameters.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. There's going to be nuance. I'm just dumbed it down as much as possible.
Yeah. Right.
How do your designers manage complexity and abstract conversations? Like, someone writing down script. I'll read the question from Marvin. How do you manage the issue of dealing with abstract conversational design, meaning that you're not able to write down this script that everyone goes through, but you have to think in an abstract way to catch everyone that might pop up? I guess talking about context, but I guess I want to hear it from.
Yes, that is an awesome question. It's a challenge. One of the ways that, I'll mention two kind of specific examples of how we've solved, or how not solved, and I don't mean like fixed totally, how we've gotten about that problem. Because I think that is, did you say Margaret? That is the essence of good conversational design, is that it is abstract and people don't follow scripts and they don't answer the way that you think they're going to.
Right.
A lot of the time. What do you do, right? Because really at the end of the day, chatbots are not AI powered, however AI powered they are. It's like they're not human. And so they're not having a live conversation, and it is scripted. But okay, so two of the ways. Yeah, right.
They don't. Yeah.
The first example that I would want to share about that is something we call side doors, and so we craft like a flow that someone would go through, and generally you'd enter at the top. But we developed a way to use context and eventing so that we can have different sets of training phrases and parameters that we're listening for that can kind of slot you into that into that flow at different points. So that's one way that we've tried to be more flexible about how we present our conversations. Another one is contextual fallbacks. So instead of having a single fallback if the bot doesn't understand, we employ context along a certain topic, like a common context along a certain topic, so that if you fall out of that flow that you're in, you at least can get a topical response that tries and helps to get you back on track, or rather get you back on, determine whether you need to get back on track, or you actually are trying to get out and you're saying something totally different, but that we can feel a little smarter about how we're responding to unknowns. than just a blanket, like, sorry, my humans haven't programmed me with that, like, every single time.
Yeah, dedicated fallback.
Yeah. Oh, wait, and one more is we've developed a little bit of like a memory in the bot to be able to remember where in the flow you came from, so that we can reuse flows and provide dynamic responses. Like, so if you came in through A or you came in through B, you can get eventually to the same intent, and you actually go a different way based on where you came from. And so that with the contextual fallbacks is our to date most sophisticated approach at that kind of abstraction, because it allows us to kind of reroute you around if we need to, and re-ask a question if we feel like we need to for some reason. So,
so last question. This has been a lot of fun. We should do this more often.
We should. I like this.
Yeah. So you shared this with me a long time ago, and I just love the story so much. I still think about it. And that was that you guys had this insight of changing I to we. And that was kind of like, on some level, it's, you know, you have a conversation, it breaks down here, it's easy to understand. But if you have a conversation that all throughout is not as efficient as it could be, and you're making the same mistake everywhere, how would you even find out?
Oh.
And I think I and we is kind of like falls in the bucket.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. So, right, we noticed that people thought they were talking to a human, even though we were super clear about about it being a bot. And it's just, people don't read things. I don't. I know. It's like, just, whatever. And so after like a lot of analysis and brainstorming and I think user research, qualitative user research played a part in this journey too. Was we shouldn't have the bot have this a single identity. It really is an extension of GoDaddy, and we do want to speak as GoDaddy to our customers. And so instead of it being this individual entity, we flipped to using plural pronouns. And in the same vein as that, we lean heavily on second person pronouns when we write. So instead of like, we can show you how to do that, it's you can do that here. And it really flipped the focus from it being all about this bot to being all about the customer who's talking to the bot, which is what it should be, right? That's that's where your focus is. That's what you're trying to solve. It's like who you're writing for. So we saw a drop in that, but the way we found it was that we just had a huge spike of, like, I'm trying to think back now. I think it was like, you're not listening to me, or I already said that. It was these phrases that we saw so much of that were just really indicative that the person didn't understand that they were talking to a bot. They thought they were talking to a human, and you're going to behave differently,
right?
Because humans are human.
You have high expectations.
Right.
Awesome. Well, it's been so awesome talking with you.
Welcome to my last one.
And then you're going to be back in just a little bit for the Zero to Launch panel. So,
yeah, I'll see you there.
Yeah, so Mira will be back. And if you guys have any questions, you can ask her in the stage area, or just hit her directly, or you can email her. She'll give it to you probably in the chat. Yes, and we're going to take a very quick 5-minute coffee break, and then we're going to be back with the UI UX panel, the conversational design panel, and we're going to do a super duper deep dive in conversational design. So a lot of the stuff that Mira and I talked about, we're going to put gasoline and take steroids, and it's going to be like Yeah, it's going to be crazy. And we have Hans coming up for that, and Vittorio. And I noticed in the chat some of you guys are asking about bot design tools. So one of those tools is Bot Society, and we have the founder. So we're going to take a quick break. You can get coffee, and then we'll see you back in a couple of minutes.